Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue on with our discussion on addictions. I believe what I was going to do was move on to substance abuses, but Liv Miles asked a question about reading addiction, particularly as it pertains to like romance readers. She has a really good YouTube channel. I'll put a link down in below so you can kind of go and check her out. It says paranormal romance, but reality, she talks about a lot of other different topics as well, and so she's definitely worth a follow. But anyway, yeah. So her kind of question is like reading addiction, and so that brings me into the realm of process addictions, and so let's talk about that, broadly. A process addiction is an addiction that doesn't really involve substances. That's probably the best way to put it. Is we have a big category over here of all the substance abuse, alcohol, weed, heroin, whatever, and then kind of everything else. I would also include eating disorder related addictions as like a third category. That's like the binge eating, exercise addiction, stimulant abuse, not cocaine or meth, but like high amounts of caffeine or laxatives. These are, this is all stuff related to eating disorders, and so it's very specific. So process addiction is this very broad kind of category that's almost everything else. And in the counseling world, the two that seem to come up the most is porn addiction and video game addiction. Porn addiction is different than sex addiction because porn just means, you're not really engaging in sex. You're just watching porn, usually online for the most part. And then there's video games. Both of these neither of these really involve putting substances in your body. Now, they do change your chemical composition because they both release dopamine, which makes you feel good, which makes you want to do more of it. But reality, almost anything that you do that is pleasurable causes dopamine. So watching a really pretty sunset can cause an increase in dopamine. I haven't ever heard of anyone talk about sunset watching addiction. That would be an interesting one. But reality is that it's not something or a substance that you're putting in your body. And then we have reading. Reading is not something you can diagnose. Oddly enough, they changed the DSM, or they were in the process of changing the DSM when I was in grad school to be a counselor, and that was one of the ones they were kicking around was video game addiction. Well, as someone who's been playing a video game since the Atari 2600, in the 80s, playing adventure and that sort of thing. I kind of took exception to this because and reading was actually my sort of a counterexample is that, yes, you can argue that video games are addictive. And here's why. Because remember, addiction is a continued behavior despite significant negative consequences. So let's say in the realm of video games, someone spends a lot of time playing video games. This is usually the big impact is for people with process addictions. It's something that sucks up a lot of their time. Like with pornography use, people will spend hours, scrolling through porn, looking at porn, masturbating to porn, exchanging porn with other people online, and before they know it, hours have passed and they haven't really done much of anything else. Porn can also have an impact on people's relationships. For some people, they think that, that they feel like if their husband, because it's usually the woman who has this issue, that if her husband or boyfriend is looking at women on online porn, that's kind of like cheating. And it kind of is. There's an argument to be made for that, and that's a whole other lengthy discussion. And so time is one of the big sucks. Well, that's a big problem with video games, is that you get in, you log in, and before you know it, hours have passed, and you haven't done your homework, you haven't taken care of all the stuff around the house, you haven't spent time with your family or your friends. I'm kind of the opinion just playing online with your friends, not exactly the same thing as spending time with them. I don't know. It kind of depends. If you have if these are friends outside of video games that you also log in, like you normally hang out at school and you do stuff, and then you go home and then you log in, you play, whatever the big one is today. Now I lost it. Call of Duty, for instance. Then that's okay. That's just doing another activity with your friends. If this is a person that you've never actually met in real life, they live in Australia, and you play video games with them, that's not really a friend. That's just a voice on a headphones. That's not quite the same thing. I might get hate mail for that, but that's kind of, from a psychological standpoint, that's how that is. And so video games can do the same thing. You spend so much time playing video games that you don't have friends, you don't have relationships, you miss school, you skip school, your grades start to suffer. Maybe you don't go into work, because you want to play video games more. Spending money, video games can be kind of expensive. And so some people may not have the money to afford lots and lots of video games. And there's a lot of video games that they're all about, like expansion packs and DLC and microtransactions. And all of that is meant to sort of suck up more and more of your money. And yeah, if your video game, if your process with what you're doing is negatively impacting your finances, if it is harder for you to pay rent because you spent lots of money on video games, then yeah, that's an addiction too. And so I can actually kind of agree with that, but at the same time, almost all of that stuff could be said about reading as well. And that's one of the things that Liv was pointing out, was that, some romance readers will go through 2 books a day. Romance has been the leading genre for decades. I don't know if it's ever not been the leading genre. Maybe you have to go back, way back into the 40s or 30s or something that before you find it. But I know pretty much my whole life that's what everyone has always said. I remember when I was a kid, if I went to the bookstore, there would be just racks and racks and racks of Harlequin romance novels. Still to this day, if I go to the half-price books up the road, there's a giant section of romance novels, and just jam-packed. And I know they've got more in the back, too. My grandma used to be a big Harlequin romance reader. That was back in the 70s and 80s and that sort of thing. So romance readers are very voracious, and that's the reason why if you know of a writer who is making a full-time living off of their writing, they're probably a romance writer, because that's what they can do. They can and there are a lot of readers who, once they find a writer that they like, they find a world that they like or a character that they like, they will buy everything, and some people even say this is an insta buy. This author's work is an insta buy. As soon as it comes out, I just buy it. This makes me think I really probably need to start writing romance. Probably need to read it first. But yeah, all that stuff that I just said about video games, and to some degree porn, actually, porn works too. You can put that into romance, because if someone, and it's typically a woman, if a woman spends all day reading romance novels, well, that's just the same as spending all day playing video games or all day watching porn. Spending lots of money on books that they really can't maybe afford, because, again, these books no one of them is very expensive, but again, it's kind of like cigarettes. No one cigarette is expensive, but when you add up all of the pack, if you buy smoke a pack a day, well, that can be about $8 a day, $8 a pack, depending on where you are or what you're buying. Multiply that by 30, that's $240 a month. That starts to add up, and that's just, fairly, and people will read more, like I said, more than one book a day. And so, it can have a financial impact. I think also, like porn, and I think Liv Miles actually did a video on this, so you might want to go through her channel and check this out, are romance novels like porn for women? And I think the answer is maybe. It's definitely not the same. Watching porn, a video of porn, stimulates different parts of the brain in a way that a romance novel doesn't. And so in that sense, if romance or erotica is porn for women, it's probably a healthier version, because it's not shoved into your face. You still have to imagine these things. You still have to imagine what's going on. Reading something always engages different parts of the brain than just watching something or watching a movie or something. That's the reason why a lot of people like watching the movie, but they don't like reading the book, or vice versa, and that sort of thing, because it always engages different parts of the brain. And so in that sense, no, romance novels are not like pornography. But in one sense, they can be, in the sense that one of the reasons why people get lost in process addictions is they're trying to escape their everyday life. They're trying to add some sort of excitement and some sort of fantasy. Sometimes it's even just a distraction. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I play Elder Scrolls Online. It's a MMO. It's the favorite one I've ever played. I like getting kind of lost in that world and fighting monsters. They have really great storylines for some of their quests. Some of the people who write some of those quests are really good. And so I like kind of getting lost in that. And there's, of course, all this sort of lore. And so you can kind of, the Elder Scrolls has lore going back, I think, 25 years or something. It's been a while. And so that is part of the fun of video games. Porn is the same sort of thing. You're getting lost in the sexual fantasies of people doing stuff that you probably never will, having sex with people you probably never won't. And so romance in that sense fits the same category. Reading in general fits that same category. That lets you get lost in this other world with these other characters doing things and that aren't real. And in many ways, romance is the same sort of thing. The stuff that happens in a lot of romance novels, if they happen in the real world, you'd call, the police. There's a meme that I really like that talked about, like, the reason why 50 Shades of Grey was considered a romance bestseller was because he was a billionaire. If that guy lived in a trailer park, it would be like, a Criminal Minds episode or something else like that. It would not be considered romantic or anything else. And that's kind of what the fantasy is a billionaire, cowboy, werewolf, vampire, shifter who, runs a motorcycle club, in the mafia, whatever. You check all these little boxes. And these are guys that most women would never ever want to have anything to do with. Although there is dark romance, and I do kind of wonder about the sort of women who read dark romance. But yeah, in that sense, reading can be just as addictive as any other process addiction. And really treating reading is the same thing as treating any other process addiction. Is first, and really any substance abuse too, is you first have to find out what it is that the addiction is giving the person. What was it doing for them? And for a lot of the process addictions, it's usually they just want to escape their life. And so then you have to ask, well, what is it going on in your life that you're escaping from? For the most part, what they will say is it's not what's going on, it's what's not going on. It is that lack of fantasy. It is that lack of excitement. And then that has to be the next thing. It's like, okay, well, how can we add that into your everyday life to where your life doesn't feel like you need something, you need to escape from it, and that's a little tricky. Treating process addictions is very difficult because even though there are significant negative consequences, they're not so significant that most people think of them as a real problem. Remember, the root of addiction is a lie. And it is easy for an addiction like a porn addiction or a video game addiction or a reading addiction to tell the addict, oh, this is no big deal. It's just reading. Reading's good for you. Smart people read, Video games are fun. Lots of people read. Video games make more profits than any other entertainment out in the world. Porn, I'm just exploring my sexuality. I'm expanding my sexual horizons or whatever. It's like, no, you're sitting on your ass. That's what you're doing, really, is you're just sitting on your ass. And the people who are in the porn, yeah, they're living their lives. They're doing fun, exciting things. The people who are creating the video games or writing the books, they're the ones who are actually, doing something and living a full and engaging life. You're just sort of passively consuming this stuff. And that's one of the hard parts, is to break the process addict from the process by pointing out that their life can actually be better if they just stopped doing this thing and started doing something else. But these process addictions are just so easy. Caffeine is an addiction. I think I talked about that in the substance abuse. You can be addicted to caffeine. There's a in my DSM there's a book on, or there's a section on diagnosing people with caffeine addiction, caffeine withdrawal, and that sort of stuff. No one treats people for caffeine addiction because it's just not considered a serious addiction. I'm not even sure why it's in there, except you could argue, if someone has like a severe heart condition and they drank a lot of caffeine, then that could cause problems. But that's very rare. Most people are jacked up on caffeine and they don't even know that it's a problem until I explain to them how caffeine affects your body and how it affects your mind and your mood, and how getting it out of your system will help you actually be happier. But they don't really think about that. And the same thing with video games. And so reading is probably even harder than that, because there's no real social stigma against reading, because part of this is the ivory tower mentality. And this is really kind of where my argument against video game addiction came from, is the people who write the DSM, who decide what is a diagnosis and what is not a diagnosis, they don't like video games. These are psychiatrists and psychologists. These are the academics. These are the people in the ivory tower, and they don't play video games. They're not loading up Call of Duty or Elder Scrolls or even Candy Crush. They don't play these things, and so for them, it's bad because those people do that. Porn. I guarantee you a lot of them watch porn, but no one wants to talk about it. Porn is like one of those. And erotica is the same sort of way. It's this huge industry, but no one watches it. Pornhub is one of the most visited websites on the internet, but no one actually goes there. That sort of thing. But yeah, these ivory tower types, they like reading. Now they probably don't read actually probably do read romance. They just don't want to talk about it. But they like reading. Reading is that's good for you. That's good for the mind and stuff. So reading can't possibly be an addiction. But yeah, video games, oh hell yeah. And so really a lot of this says more about the ivory tower mentality of the people who get to write the DSM, that sort of thing. So anyway, I hope that kind of clarified, gave some food for thought. Process addiction, I think probably bringing it all home, process addictions do impact people's lives. And they make you kind of check out. From a writing standpoint, I probably should include this because it's a writing channel. Writing about some of the process addictions can be kind of tricky because they are still so very passive. Again, readers want characters that do things. So you can maybe start off with a character has some sort of process addiction. Actually, a good example is an episode of Twilight Zone with Burgess Meredith back in the early days. He was a character who liked to read all the time. There you go. And he had these really thick glasses. He liked to read all the time, and it constantly gotten him in trouble. His wife was always complaining because all he did was read. He was screwing up at work because he was reading. His boss kind of got on him about it and that sort of thing. And I'll let you watch the episode if you haven't seen it and find out what happens. But so he was a character with a process addiction, and then the story arc, shows what happens to him with that process addiction. Or you could write a character that starts off with a process addiction, how they come out of it. Like I said, I think some of the lit RPG genre seems to do this. Someone really likes playing video games, maybe kind of addicted to video games, and somehow they get sucked into the video game, and now they have to live in that world, and now they have to actually do stuff and that sort of thing. So that's kind of an interesting, kind of track. But anyway, let me know what you think. Do you think reading can be an addiction? Do you think maybe this is painting addictions with too broad of a brush, or are you a reading addict? Maybe we need to start a support group for reading addicts. Anyway, but yeah, if you have other ideas for videos, then just post them down in the comments, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.